Right when I thought I was done with the whole body image series, I realized that I have to do at least one more episode that falls into that category. And the reason is because since my tummy tuck episode has been released and people have been listening to it, I've been receiving some feedback. And actually, I've been hearing from some women who are being open with me about their own considerations for having a tummy tuck. And let me just say right out the gate how much I love that. I love that so much because that is why I decided to go ahead and do the episode on my tummy tuck, even though it felt like I was putting myself out there in a really personal, kind of vulnerable way, since our society oftentimes judges people for having plastic surgery. But I don't believe that that stigma should be a thing. And I think that people have their reasons for doing what they do, and it's really not up to anybody else to judge what those reasons are. And you really can't understand anybody's personal experience because you're not them. So that's why I decided to go ahead and share my experience with my tummy tuck with all of you guys. And now that I'm receiving this feedback and hearing from more women who are openly talking about, I've been considering this for myself, I feel like I want to do a little bit more diving in to my own experience, the wisdom that I have now in hindsight, now that I've been through it, and what kind of advice I would offer to anybody who's considering this specific surgery. So you can kind of benefit from the fact that I've already been through it, and based on what I experienced, I've learned what I would have done differently being on this end of it and knowing that I went through what I went through. So that's what I want to focus on today. So welcome to the episode on my tummy tuck advice.
I'm Dr. Williams, and this is my podcast. I have 2 graduate degrees in psychology, am a licensed mental health counselor, and an expert in the area of spirituality. I am devoted to living my best life and am sharing it with all of you. I'm bringing my expertise, education, and life experiences to you through this podcast. Everyone deserves to enjoy life, and that is what I'm here to talk about. Depression, anxiety, grief, you name it, we all go through it at one time or another. I believe there's a better way to come at these things than mainstream mental health care offers, and I'm here to offer you my perspective and dig into discovering how you can feel good no matter what life throws at you. It is my intention to contribute goodness to this world, and the content herein is how I do that. But one disclaimer before we dive in: should you decide to apply the information offered here, be prepared for improvements in your life. You may even live happily ever after, and you'll only have yourself to thank. This is Feel Good Now, the Dr. Williams podcast.
The reason that I want to decrease plastic surgery stigma is because I am not on board with any form of body shaming. And we don't necessarily consider shaming someone for having plastic surgery body shaming, but it is. Because if you're shaming anybody for doing anything to their own body, then that is body shaming. It comes from a lot of different places, why people shame others about their body, and I don't want to get into that right now. But I don't think that it's helpful, and I don't think that it's beneficial on a society level for us to be doing any kind of body shaming. And if people want to have plastic surgery, that's their right. It's their body. They can do that. And I believe in supporting that to a degree. You know, I've mentioned body dysmorphia in the series on body image and how plastic surgery can become a problem if people are having it to correct things time after time after time, and it's getting to an unhealthy state. So that's not what I mean, but I just feel strongly that we should not be shaming women in particular, just because that's the majority of people who are having these kind of plastic surgeries, for having them, because we don't know what it's like living in their skin. And if this is the choice they're making, they have their reasons, and I support you. So I think that came across in my episode on the tummy tuck and sharing my experience, because I've had several people reach out to me expressing that they have been considering the same surgery for themselves. So this made me feel like if somebody was my friend and they told me, hey, I'm really considering having a tummy tuck, I would be like, okay, let's talk about it, because I've been through it and I had a really difficult time. Like, my surgery was not an easy one. And now being on the finishing end of going through it, I realized I really was not prepared. Not in the way that I would have liked to have been. So I'm just going to do a general kind of advice if you are considering having a tummy tuck. Something about me is I have a tendency to research the littlest of things. I find enjoyment in it. I really like kind of diving in and understanding something to a greater degree. And then I use that information a lot of times to make decisions in my life. Well, you would think that with such a monumental surgery, I would have done that to a great extent. But I didn't. And I would change that. I would definitely research more if I could go back and start this whole process over again. Doing the research does a couple things. It offers you some insight into what to expect. It offers you your options and which direction you want to go based on what you're trying to do for yourself. It also helps gain some momentum in manifesting the results that you want to have. What happened with me was my cousin, Allison, maybe you've heard her interview in that episode. She talked about how we had the same plastic surgeon. And what had happened was Allison saw our surgeon first, and she had nothing but wonderful things to say about him. He had a good record. She mentioned that he was the best surgeon in the state. And I was won over by her experience and her advice. She's somebody who I value, and I feel like she has a good sense, especially when it comes to physical kind of opinions. You know, she doesn't hold back when it comes to judging something physically. She would tell me that doesn't look good. And so I felt like her advice was valuable to me because she'd already been through it. And I knew that she had done her research to find a good surgeon. So I'm not proud of this because this is kind of like finding a surgeon 101. You don't just go with the first surgeon that you have a consult with. I mean, you might end up going with that surgeon that you had your first consult with, but you have several consults before you make that decision. I didn't do that. I didn't do that at all. I was under the impression that this surgeon was the best in the state, and that to me meant it doesn't get any better than this. I want this surgeon. And for me, the price suggested that that was true, that I would be paying a little bit more than some other surgeons, but I would be getting the quality, and that meant a lot to me. And I went to the consult with my surgeon, and then I was convinced that this was the person I wanted to do my surgery. Well, my advice to you is to please get a consult with several surgeons before you make that choice. And I'm not saying that's because my surgeon was horrible. I'm not saying that. My experience was difficult, and I went through a lot of things that a lot of women don't after their tummy tuck. And I had a tendency to blame my surgeon, but that was not 100% accurate because I know more about vibrational reality and my own energy and what I was creating in my own experience. So I take more responsibility for it now. But with that said, I still recommend talking to several surgeons because you will get a feeling based on your comparison, and then you can make an educated decision about which surgeon you want to go with. When choosing the surgeon that you want to have a consult with, now keep this in mind, consults are not free. A lot of surgeons charge for the consultation. It's like usually around $100, something like that. And I believe that a lot of surgeons will waive that fee if you decide to go with them for the surgery. But if you're going to be having several consults, you're going to be paying for some of those. And I think it's worth it. I wouldn't back out of that just to save a couple $100. I mean, you're getting ready to enter into a surgery that's going to cost several thousands of dollars. So what's a couple extra $100 to make sure that you're making the right choice? But if you are choosing a surgeon in the United States, you definitely want a board certified surgeon. And my surgeon is board certified. And I did make sure of that. My surgeon also has won awards for being the best plastic surgeon in the state. Now, when I took that information from Allison, I just took it as, wow, this guy is the best in the state. And I didn't look into it until after my surgery, but I've learned some things about what that really means. So they do give awards for best surgeons in the state. It's on an annual basis. And I don't remember the last year that my surgeon won the award, but it was several years ago. And the awards are in his office. They're displayed. And I didn't really think about it before entering into my surgery. But then afterwards, as I spent a lot of time in that waiting room, like a lot of time, I've gone to a lot of appointments, I was kind of analyzing these awards and I was thinking, wow, that was kind of a long time ago. Just because a surgeon has been labeled as one of the best surgeons in the state, it doesn't mean that that title is current. So keep that in mind. If you want somebody who is currently labeled as the best surgeon in the state, then you're going to need to look into that and make sure that that person has the award for this current year, or at least last year. When I did finally look into the title and where my surgeon was on the list, which is after my surgery, was when I did this, kind of like backtracking research, because I was looking for validation in the experience I was having. I found out that my surgeon was a lot lower on the list than I thought he would be. That's another consideration. Just because a surgeon has the title, it doesn't mean that they're at the top of the list. There's a long list, and I'm not sure how they dole out these awards, how you meet the requirements, I don't know. But I'm sure there's some kind of system, and once you can mark off all of the different requirements, then you get the award. Well, there were a lot of surgeons above mine on this list. And when I realized that, it gave me a lot of anxiety, right? I was like, oh my gosh, look at all these other surgeons I could have had a consult with when considering who I wanted to do my surgery. And here they are with these titles, even more so than the surgeon I went with. So there is a list. You can look at it and you can see where these people are falling on the list. That's just for the US. I don't know how things are done in other countries, but I do want to say, don't discount Mexico as an option for having a tummy tuck surgery. And some of you are probably cringing right now, like, what? Don't go to Mexico for a major surgery. And I can't speak to that personally. So I'm not saying take that advice. I'm just saying do the research. Look into it a little bit more. Because what happened was, after my initial surgery, I developed a wound in my incision right in front. And when I developed this wound, I started looking for groups on social media of other women who had experienced similar things to me, because this came with a lot of depression and anxiety, that I was experiencing some negative effects after my surgery, and I wanted support. And so I started looking for other people who had had similar results or similar experiences so that I could talk to people and get an idea of what I was in for. And that all goes back to the whole research aspect. I did not prepare well enough before I entered into this surgery. I really did not know what to expect post-op. And I feel like my surgeon and my surgeon's team could have done a better job explaining that part to me. If they were to ask me for some kind of review or feedback, that is the feedback I would offer. That even though these women are here in your office and they're saying they want this surgery, it doesn't necessarily mean that they understand what exactly they're in for. Because I was kind of blindsided by a lot of things. And the wound that I experienced was one of them. It was very upsetting to me that I had developed this wound that would not heal. And all of a sudden I have this gaping hole in my stomach when I was expecting to go in, have this surgery, have a difficult recovery, obviously, because I understood that this was very invasive and a difficult recovery. But I did not expect to have a gaping hole in my skin that would not heal. And it was very upsetting. And so I found a group on Facebook that was for this specifically, for women who had experienced wounds post-op. And what I learned was this is a common thing. Now, nobody prepared me for that, including myself, because I didn't look into it deep enough to feel like I knew that this was something that could happen. But apparently it's very common to develop wounds. And there's things that kind of play into that. I guess smoking is one of them. If you're a smoker and you smoke post-op, your chances of developing a wound are higher. I'm not a smoker, and yet I still developed the wound. And my surgeon kind of just blew over it, was like, well, it's just something that happens. And he took care of it. He treated me for it. I actually went in for a checkup and I was like, can you sew this back together? And he did it right then and there in my checkup appointment. So he recut me. He gave me local anesthesia and he cut again and sewed me back together to close the wound. But I was more upset because I didn't know this was a thing. And a lot of women go through it. So in this group on Facebook, I found that out. I discovered that a lot of women develop wounds and they're very difficult to heal. And then I caught some flack in the group when I posted a picture of the wound and then I posted a picture of it all sewn back together after he had treated it. And a lot of women were like, you shouldn't have done that. It's going to open back up again. It's going to be a problem all over again. And thankfully it didn't. Not the way that you would think. But later on, I did develop an abscess, and that could have had something to do with the previous wound. This is what I'm saying. Like, it was kind of just one thing after the other with me, and it wasn't good. And it was a difficult year. It was a really difficult year.
Real quick, before I get back to this topic, I want to know if you have a product or service that aligns with the content here on the Dr. Williams podcast. If so, this space could be your advertisement. Reach out to me by going to drwilliamspodcast.com. Okay, back to the episode.
What I would recommend is joining groups on social media of other women who have had this surgery previously. Now, adding a little bit of law of attraction into that suggestion, I would recommend finding groups of women who positively view their surgery post-op, just because that's what you want to expect. I had also joined just a regular tummy tuck group, and that's how I found out about Mexico, because a lot of the women who had positive reactions to their surgery had their surgery done in Mexico. And I didn't even know that was an option when I decided to go in and have my surgery done. And I probably wouldn't have even considered it, just because we consider the US to be like the best, right? Like, if you really want to have something done well, you get it done in the States. But there are really good surgeons and wonderful clinics and resorts all focused on plastic surgery. And I mean, some women go down to Mexico and they have the whole gamut done. They have multiple surgeries done at one time, which I can't even fathom that. I can't even imagine what that's like to recover from more than what I did, because that recovery was extremely difficult. And to have even more pain and, I just don't even know. But women do it. So what I'm saying is, there are other options than choosing a surgeon in your own vicinity. Actually, one of my friends flew to Florida for her surgery. And there's a lot of good plastic surgeons in Florida. Of course, you're going to pay more because you're traveling. And, if you're paying for some of the best surgeons in the country, you have to expect to have that price tag that goes along with it. But is it worth it to you? It's totally up to you and the research you do and how you feel when you're looking into it. I can't stress that enough. So if you're looking into it and you find a place in Mexico and you're reading reviews and everything looks really good, you maybe find some people on social media who have had their surgery done at the place you're considering, you talk to them, you get a feel for what they went through, and you feel good about it, then don't discount that just because it's out of the country. That's all I'm saying. I'm not pushing for surgery in Mexico, but I'm just saying that a lot of people do it and they get positive results. Clearly, you don't want to be going down some back alley, some guy who's secretly performing surgeries in Mexico. I mean, use your common sense, but don't discount Mexico just because it's Mexico. I do recommend speaking to other people who have been through the experience already and can offer you some insight based on what they went through. It also offers you a chance to possibly connect with people who have had surgery with the surgeon you're considering. And there's a lot to be said for that. There's a lot to be said for that, because they're going to be able to tell you more about what to expect, given that your circumstances are going to be similar to theirs. Although, you have to keep in mind that even though someone else's experience was similar, given the parameters, it doesn't mean that yours is going to be like that. Your body is unique, and it's going to be your own special, unique experience, no matter how you look at it. That's just the way it is. But I think you should embrace that. Trust your body. Trust that you know that your body is working for your higher good. That's you tuning into your source at that point. And trusting that your cells are regenerating, your cells are working for you, they want well-being. Everything is aligned with goodness if you embrace it to be such. I didn't know this, but there are different options for tummy tucks. And a lot of the women that were in the tummy tuck group on Facebook that I was involved with had something called a drainless tummy tuck surgery. And according to them, they were so happy with their results and grateful that they did not have drains put in. I did have drains put in. My surgeon had 2 drains put in, one on either side of my abdomen, and that was to collect the fluid post-op. And then that would have to be emptied, and I had the drains for about 5 days. I believe on the 5th day is when I had them removed. And they're uncomfortable, and it's no fun to have drains. So much so that when I developed my hematoma after my 3rd revision surgery, I asked my surgeon to do everything possible to not put a drain in, which he did. He did not put a drain in because he knew that's what I wanted, and he didn't do it. So then I developed the hematoma underneath my skin, which is something that wouldn't happen if you have a drain in. And then he was regretting that decision, and he had wished that he had put a drain in. But it turned out okay. Everything turned out fine. My body was able to recover from it, and I never did have to have a drain put in, although I got very, very close to him having to put a drain in. So with that said, I don't know much about drainless tummy tuck surgeries, but I do know that it's an option, and it's something that you should research before deciding which surgeon you want to go to. And this is kind of a surgeon preference kind of thing. Different surgeons perform different kinds of ways, and doing a drainless is a specific way of performing the surgery versus somebody who puts drains in. So that's something to look into. Then I think it's important for you to know what to expect afterwards. After the surgery is done, you kind of know recovery is going to be difficult. This is highly invasive and transformative. I mean, you are going to have a completely different abdomen after this surgery. But the things that I didn't know that I wasn't going to regain feeling in my belly. And this is also something I looked into after the fact, because I was like, wow, I'm still numb. I still can't feel anything. Is this normal? And my surgeon even told me, the feeling might not come back. Well, what I learned in my own research afterwards is that most women do not regain any sense of feeling between their belly button and the incision. And that is across the board the most common thing to expect. Now, that's a fairly small area on your abdomen. That may be something that you're okay with. If you do regain sensation, maybe you're practicing law of attraction and you are really good at manifesting and you can make it happen, then more power to you. For me, I don't have physical sensation in a large portion of my abdomen. And it's something that I am aware of every day because it feels weird. You know that feeling when your limbs go to sleep, like your foot or your arm or something, and it's got that numb, heavy kind of feeling? That's what it feels like all the time. And I did get some sensation back after this last revision surgery, and I actually thought it was healing and I was regaining sensation that I thought I would never have again. But then it kind of backpedaled, and I don't have a lot of sensation in my abdomen. I also have a lot of swelling, And my surgeon thought it was weird that I have so much swelling. And I mean, the whole year after my initial surgery, I was dealing with a swollen abdomen. Like my muscles are protruding on my abdomen more than you would expect, because you expect to have a flat belly after this surgery. And there's some things that I eat and drink that make it worse, but I am dealing with swelling well after my surgery. And I'm still dealing with that now. I did have the revision, so I really don't know how long that's going to be. Is that a forever thing? I don't know. Is it going to get better? I hope so. Just so you know that sensation in your skin may not return. Something I didn't know, kind of wished I had. Just know that it's common that wounds can form. And one thing that I would recommend, what my surgeon does, is puts on a compression garment that goes just around your abdomen and your back, like it wraps around, and it secures with Velcro. I like that better than a compression garment, and I've done both. And at first I thought that what my surgeon was using was not as good. I thought, why am I wearing this cheap wraparound thing when I could get an actual compression garment that is used for plastic surgeries? And that's something that it goes down your legs and it comes up and it has straps and it's just compressing everything, just holding it all in. Well, I had paid the extra several $100s to get this compression garment and I was wearing it. That's the other thing. Like after this surgery, the only time you are not wearing compression is when you're taking a shower. You're sleeping in it, you're living in it for months. And I even wore mine longer than a lot of people do because of my swelling. The compression garment, and I don't know why it made a big difference, but it did. It was rubbing on my incision in a way that I think the wound developed. I think that's what caused it. It was too tight, and just walking just kind of rubbed it to the point where I think contributed to the wound developing. But I can't say that for all certainty. My doctor couldn't confirm that. It's just a feeling that I have. So I would say use what your surgeon gives you for compression. Don't necessarily think that the grass is greener. But wounds do develop sometimes. And just know that that's something that could happen. And that would require just more healing time. But it will heal. And your surgeon may be able to fix it, revise it. That was my first revision, was having my wound close back up again. Now, these things are something to think about if you are considering having your surgery out of the US, because who's following you after that? Obviously, you're not going to be flying back to Mexico every couple of months to have checkups. And I don't know how that works. So I'm just going to throw that out there as something to look into if you do want to have your surgery even out of state, because then who are you going to? You're obviously going to need to have checkups. My surgeon follows you for a whole year after this surgery. And then if you have revisions, that date gets pushed and pushed and pushed. So that's why I'm still under care, even though I am almost a year and a half post-op from my original surgery. The other thing that you should be aware of is revisions are common. And I didn't know that. I kind of thought this was going to be a one-time go in, have the surgery. Now I'm perfect. I can recover and move on with my life. But it definitely was not that. After the wound revision, I still had the belly button issue, right? My belly button was not centered in my abdomen. And that just carried on and carried on and carried on. But it wasn't something that we could address until a year after my surgery. That's just the way that we had chosen to do it because of all these other things that happened. So the wound revision was my first revision. Then I realized that I had developed what's called dog ears. And dog ears are another super common occurrence post-op, but I didn't know that. And what dog ears are, so to give you an idea, the incision that you get with a tummy tuck is from hip to hip, all the way across your abdomen. It's a very long incision. Sometimes where the surgeon closes up the incision on your hips, it will develop what's called dog ears. And it's just kind of a flap of skin that kind of resembles a floppy dog ear. And my surgeon even told me early on, sometimes that area has to be touched up. So I kind of had an idea that this was something that I might have to do, but I didn't know before going in for my surgery. So I'm telling you now that dog ears, very common. And what it requires is you to go back in for surgery where your surgeon will cut further posterior. So continue your incision further onto your back area and re-sew it back together. And it fixes the dog ear problem. Now, I had that revision surgery while I was awake. I wouldn't recommend that. I did that because I didn't want to pay for anesthesia again. Just the anesthesia is like $2,000, and I didn't want to do that. So I just did a local anesthesia, and I lived through the surgery awake. In addition to having the dog ears fixed, at that time, my surgeon offered to do liposuction on my abdomen because of the swelling issue that I was having that he couldn't explain. And he thought that that would help get me the definition I was looking for. So I agreed to that because I also wanted my incision in front to be fixed. It wasn't a straight line. It was really uneven, and it had a lot to do with the wound and being re-sewn back together. It wasn't very pretty, and it was kind of not aesthetically pleasing. Well, as aesthetically pleasing as a scar can be. So I wanted him to recut it open and fix it and make it look more aesthetically pleasing. So while he was doing that, he decided, hey, if you want the lipo, I'll go in there and do that, and maybe that'll help you get the shape you're looking for. So I was awake during that too, and that was a weird experience, feeling this tube rub up and down on my abdomen under my skin. But it didn't necessarily hurt. It just felt strange and even kind of tickled at some points, which was weird. But I would say if you're going to do revision surgeries and you have the ability to pay for the anesthesia, I would recommend that. Being awake was kind of crazy. So that was my second revision surgery. So now we get to my 1-year anniversary checkup. And I'm like, all right, what are we going to do about this belly button issue? And my surgeon's like, well, it's up to you. And I was really going back and forth on it. I didn't know what I wanted to do because I really did not want to go through another surgery. But I knew that I should do it while I was within my revision period of time, which is something you should also understand, that depending on the surgeon, for my surgeon, he follows a tummy tuck patient up to a year after their surgery. And if there's any revisions that are needed within that period of time, that's covered under the price of the original surgery. So I didn't have to pay for any of the revisions I had done, except for when we did go through with moving my belly button back to center, I had to pay for anesthesia again. And it wasn't even an option for me to be awake for that one. My doctor said, no, it's going to be too much for you to be awake for that. So I did have to pay for anesthesia for that one, but I didn't have to pay for the revision. So that was my most recent revision surgery and the one that I have been recovering from. So all in all, I had 3 revision surgeries after my tummy tuck surgery. And I guess revisions are common. I didn't know that going into it. I've become more comfortable with it now. But it was upsetting at first because this was one of the hardest things I've ever done physically. And the last thing I wanted to do was be put back in a situation where I had to recover again. And that was hard for me to deal with. But I chose to do it because I was within that revision period of time. It was covered financially, and I wanted to be happy with my results. So I did what I had to do to get to that point. If you're considering a tummy tuck, you have to know this is a long-term recovery period. I'm a year and a half post-op from my original surgery, almost one more month, I think. And I'm still recovering. Like, this is long haul kind of stuff. And I don't know how long that's going to go for. Am I going to keep swelling up when I eat certain things or drink certain things? I don't know. Am I going to get the sensation back in my belly? I don't know. I just don't know. I have to just put the time in. And what I'm trying to do is focus on the positive aspects of my body the best way that I possibly can, because I want to manifest positive aspects of my body. And now I know how to do that better than when I first started this process. But for you, just now considering this surgery and stepping into the first stages of getting some momentum going, I recommend doing everything in your power to keep it positively focused. Don't read the horror stories. And I know I shared mine with you. I actually, when I was considering what I was going to say to you guys in this episode, I was feeling kind of split energy about this because I wanted to prepare you based on what I went through, right? Share what I went through to give you some insight on how to not have that experience. But at the same time, I want you to be able to develop positivity around this so that you don't have a bad experience, so that you go into it with all sorts of positivity. Therefore, you will come out with all sorts of positivity. And I know that's possible, and it's up to you, but you have to have positive expectations. And that can be hard to do when you're preparing for the negative results that could happen. So my recommendation is expect the best. Go into it believing that it's going to go exactly how you want it to go. Even though you're doing the things to prepare, you're researching, you are having consults with several different surgeons to choose the right one, you're considering where you're going to have the surgery, the clinic, the doctor, the state, the country, whatever it may be. You're aware of what could happen post-op so that you're not disappointed like I was, because you know that it's a possibility. Whatever it may be, it's all good. Just make sure that you're trying to focus on what you want. And what you want are those positive results, that positive experience. You want this to be something that is like, oh, I'm so glad I did this. I mean, we all have to go through recovery, but your recovery could be extremely easy if you expect it to be. And I didn't. I expected it to be rough, and boy, was it. In the other episode on my tummy tuck, I mentioned that I would have been meditating before going into this process. I would have been scripting positive expectations. I would have been visualizing things the way I wanted them to be. But most of all, the most important thing that you can do is to reach for the feeling of happiness, of satisfaction. You want that. And if you can find that feeling before entering into your surgery, that will be your experience. So that's the best advice I could give you. I had a couple other things that I was going to touch on, but I'm not going to because they're not positively focused, and I don't think that that's going to benefit you in any way. So my experience doesn't have to be yours. You can go into this and have it be the monumental, life-changing experience in a positive way that you want. It can be that for you. My experience is mine, and I learned a lot from it, and I wanted to share it with you so that you know what's possible. You know the negative things that could happen. But ultimately, what I wanted to do by sharing with you is to reinforce your power. You have so much power. And this surgery will be whatever you make it to be. So you might as well make it the best decision of your life. Let it be all sorts of goodness. And I wish you all the satisfaction in the world with your results.
That concludes this episode, but if you don't want to wait for the next episode to come out, I have more for you at drwilliamspodcast.com. You can learn more about me and my journey to podcasting, find all the ways to connect with me on social media, and there's a button to subscribe so you're the first to know what's new and upcoming. You also can shoot me an email at hello@drwilliamspodcast.com. You are so special to me, and your support does not go unnoticed. I want to support you too. This podcast is my outlet for growth because when you teach something, you hold yourself accountable and apply the information in life. But the inspiration for these episodes comes in a variety of ways, and one of those is through you. I want you to feel like this is your show too. So send me a message and let me know which episode is your favorite and why. And tell me if there's a topic you'd want to hear me talk about. Your feedback applies to so many people, and your suggestion could change someone's life for the better. The best way to do this is by subscribing to the show and leaving a review through your favorite podcast platform. I really listen to you guys, and this dialogue feeds my soul. You say that you're a fan of me, but truth be told, I am a fan of yours. Everything is working out for each of us, and we're all in this together.